Yesterday in Brisbane, a large crowd assembled to oppose laws that have just got the big tick from the Queensland Parliament's Legal Affairs and Safety Committee. Queensland's Minister for Women, Shannon Fentiman, has introduced a bill under which a person will no longer be required to undergo sexual reassignment surgery to formally register a change of sex. That means that biological men who identify as women can change their legal sex with little more than some paper and a few strokes of a pen. It's called the Births, Deaths and Marriages Registration Bill. And here's what the minister says about it. This is about making sure that a person's legal identity can match their lived identity, so she says. But the implications of this change for women and girls cannot be understated. This legislation will effectively allow men to self-identify into female-only activities, spaces and services, including sports, prisons, bathrooms and refuges. And it's all being pushed by the Minister for, wait for it, women. Fentiman has told women's advocates that there is no evidence in Australia or internationally to suggest that trans women pose an increased danger to cisgender women. Now, I might be a bit of a fusspot, but I don't much like that term. I'm not a cisgender woman. I'm just a woman. But second, there's plenty of evidence. Examples of women being harmed by trans-identified males in what should be women-only spaces abound. Just this year, we've heard stories of so-called trans women raping women in women-only prisons, hospital wards and shelters. The fact is, women's relative physical vulnerability and male patterns of criminality, not suggesting all males are criminals, of course, but the patterns that exist of the offences we know about don't just dissipate simply because of a piece of paper. The bill elevates gender identity over biological reality. It elevates it over women's and children's safety, and it elevates it over common sense. It is extraordinarily disappointing that it has been introduced by a woman, the Minister for Women, no less. Let's find out more about yesterday's rally and the implications from the bill. I have joining me Rachael Wong from Women's Forum Australia and Giggle CEO Sall Grover, both of whom were involved in yesterday's event. Welcome, Sall and Rachael, to the show. Now, Rachael, you've said almost more concerning than the bill itself has been the concerted effort to ignore and silence women who oppose the legislation, both by trans activists and the minister. What do you mean by this?
Well, look, in Queensland, during the supposed consultation time, many women, Sal included, tried to talk to Shannon Fentiman, tried to organise meetings with her. Those meetings were all denied. And then there were obviously the public hearings on the bill several weeks ago. Not a single Queensland woman or women's group was invited. That's why we brought Sal along to come and sit in our spot. And all the while, Fentiman has been, consulting with trans activists, trans lobby groups, and saying that, she's done a wide consultation and talked to everyone, whereas the people who are going to be affected the most by these laws, i.e. women and girls, have not actually been properly consulted at all.
So just fact check here. You're serious. Every trans activist group that wanted a say was given one, but there were no women's groups invited to the consultation.
So my understanding is that apparently there have been talks going on about this legislation for some time now. None of the women or women's groups that I know of have been invited to those conversations or those consultations. So I can only assume that they've been talking to everyone else basically, but women and women's groups.
That's shocking. Sal, you gave evidence at the committee hearing. What were the matters that you raised before the committee, and what were the parliamentarians interested in learning about the bill?
There's a few things that I raised. The main one was that if you have self-ID laws in Queensland, it means every Queensland resident has to deny what they see with their own eyes. So if you see a man, and that man says he's a woman, you're supposed to go along with it and say, oh, okay, that's a woman, out of what? Fear of punishment and legal repercussions. So this, while obviously in terms of female spaces and female sports affects women and girls more than anyone else, this actually affects every Queensland resident, because you're not allowed to have freedom of belief with these laws. And the parliamentarians on the committee hearing were not receptive to this at all, and sort of focused on like, why would anybody use this for negative reasons or precarious reasons? And you're like, are you kidding me? I mean, you're literally giving predators a predator's dream of being able to just self-ID into women and girls' change rooms, and you think none of them are going to take you up on the offer? It's nonsense.
Rachel, what were your reflections on the committee process?
Look, the entire time, people like myself and others there kept being sort of challenged by the committee members, specifically the Labor committee members, that there was no evidence that self-ID harms women and girls, and that there's no evidence in Australia, there's no evidence overseas, despite the fact that throughout the hearing, us and others provided countless stories of evidence. Not only that, afterwards, we were asked to, provide further evidence, which we did, and we provided pages and pages of evidence of women and girls either being excluded from their own sports, having to have the indignity of changing with men in changing rooms, being sexually assaulted in refuges or hospitals and so on. And clearly none of that was taken into account, because apparently there is no evidence of harm to women and girls from self-ID. And not only that, I will mention that our evidence, which went up on the committee's website, all the links to external examples and research were removed from that evidence. And we were told, it's policy to remove links. But this has not been applied consistently at all in submissions or other evidence on the committee's website. So I question as to why they feel they need to hide those very relevant and pertinent examples from the public.
Sal, it seems like all of this comes down to a problem among the ideological left. They just don't seem to be able to state the obvious, and that is what constitutes a woman. Do you think this is where the cause of women's lib was meant to land?
Well, definitely not. I don't think that any woman was ever fighting for men to be able to call themselves women. I mean, all through history, when women didn't have the vote, for example, everyone knew who a woman was. But I'm also reluctant to ever say that it's a left or right issue, because at the end of the day, no matter where you are politically, men are not women. That's just reality. It's just fact. But the truth and reality also is that it is very much politically left that are pushing it, unfortunately.
I guess that leads me into a good question for you, Rachel. Who came to yesterday's rally? Were they all people with a political agenda of the left or the right, or was it a mix of people?
We had an absolute complete spectrum of people. So women from across the political and ideological spectrum, women from all faiths and none, women from the left and right, just complete range of different people. Obviously, myself and Sal were there. Jacinta Price came along. Catherine Deves was there. We had academics like Renata Klein and Janet Fraser. We had a whole range of different women. We had women who had never been to a rally before and who were sort of just getting into it for the first time. And so no one can ever accuse us of being hive-minded on this issue. There's a complete diversity. And there's a very good reason for that. It's because we're dealing with an issue which is literally dealing with biology and with reality. And so it's no wonder so many different kinds of people want to get on board.
Good point. Sal, let's wrap it up with this. This is clearly not the right way to protect the rights of women. Still, though, we want to make sure people who struggle with their gender are treated with compassion and fairness. What's the right way forward here?
Well, we're talking a lot about self-ID at the moment because that is the bill on the table. But even if you have had, sort of the gender reassignment surgery or whatever it is, the medicalization of this, it still doesn't make a man a woman. So I think the way forward with this is to actually help people who have so-called gender dysphoria or autogynephilia cope with those issues and recover from them, rather than trying to make everybody into society believe a delusion.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Sal, two very formidable and brave ladies.